For 99 years, the formula locked in Coca-Cola's Atlanta vault never changed. Then one April morning in 1985, the company broke that rule and triggered one of the angriest consumer revolts in American business history over the taste of a soda. 1886, Atlanta. A local alcohol ban forces pharmacist John Pemberton to strip the wine out of his headache tonic and replace it with sugar syrup. He sells the result for 5 cents a glass at a soda fountain. And from the very first batch, he guards the recipe like a state secret. 6 years later, Asa Griggs Candler buys the formula outright, and the secrecy becomes doctrine, locked away, known only to a handful of sworn executives, never fully written down in one place. That secrecy isn't packaging. It's the entire mythology of the brand. And it's the exact thing Coca-Cola will risk destroying. 99 years later, by the 1950s, Coca-Cola isn't just winning. It owns the category. After World War II, it commands roughly 60% of the entire U.S. cola market. Pepsi barely registers as a threat. For 2 straight decades, Coke doesn't compete, it dominates. But dominance breeds a specific kind of blindness. When you've owned 60% of a market that long, you stop asking why customers stay. You assume they always will. In 1975, that assumption gets tested on live television. PepsiCo launches a blind taste test and puts it on TV. Strangers on the street. 2 unmarked cups, 1 question, which tastes better? Again and again, on camera, they pick Pepsi. It isn't a pricing war or a distribution fight. For the first time, a rival is beating Coca-Cola on the one thing the company assumed was untouchable: the taste of the product itself. Coca-Cola's own research quietly confirms what the ads are showing. Blind consumers tend to prefer a sweeter cola. Executives in Atlanta start asking a question the company has never had to ask before. What if the original formula isn't good enough anymore? That question wouldn't go away because the numbers kept getting worse. Through the late 70s and into the 80s, the slide is measurable and it doesn't stop. From that post-war high, near 60%, Coca-Cola's share of the U.S. cola market falls under 24% by 1983. In 1984 alone, Pepsi gains 1.5 points while Coke loses 1. Board meetings that used to be about growth become about damage control. This isn't a one-year dip investors can shrug off. It's a decade-long trend line pointed the wrong way, happening to the most recognizable brand on earth. For a company that built its identity on being untouchable, watching a rival close the gap year after year starts to feel less like a marketing problem and more like an existential one. And the man now in charge doesn't believe in standing still. Roberto Goizueta becomes CEO in 1981. Inheriting a company losing ground on every front. He doesn't play it safe. In 1982, he does something Coca-Cola has never done in its history. He puts the sacred name on a brand new product, Diet Coke. It works. Sales climb, and Goizueta learns something he won't forget. The untouchable brand can, in fact, be touched, and the market will reward the risk. That success rewires how far he's willing to go next. In a locked room in Atlanta, that question turns into a project, codenamed Kansas. Project Kansas is the most secretive research effort in company history. Coca-Cola quietly develops a new, sweeter formula and tests it against both the original recipe and Pepsi, blind, city after city, on nearly 200,000 consumers at a cost of roughly $4 million. The new formula wins. It beats the 99-year-old original. It beats Pepsi. On paper, the decision writes itself. The data is unambiguous, and Goizueta has already learned that bold bets pay off. But the tests measure exactly one thing: taste in a cup, in a lab, with no bottle, no logo, no memory attached. What the surveys can't capture is what happens when you take away the formula people grew up on, not just the flavor in a blind sip. On April 23, 1985, Coca-Cola finds out exactly how expensive that blind spot is. In a New York theater, in front of 200 reporters, Roberto Goizueta stands next to company president Donald Keogh and makes the announcement. For the first time in 99 years, Coca-Cola is changing its formula. The original is being retired. In its place, new Coke, sweeter, more like Pepsi, backed by 200,000 taste tests and $4 million of research. Goizueta frames it as the boldest, most confident move in the company's history. Reporters ask if the classic taste, the thing people grew up with, is simply gone for good. The answer, delivered on stage with total confidence, is yes. That confidence lasts about a week. The phones start ringing, and they don't stop. Up to 8,000 calls a day flood Coca-Cola's switchboards. Nearly 40,000 letters arrive, one addressed simply to Chief Dodo, the Coca-Cola Company. In Seattle, a man named Gay Mullins forms. The Old Cola Drinkers of America sells $5 memberships and hands out bumper stickers reading, "Give us the real thing." Again, his protest hotline logs 60,000 calls before it has to be shut down. People hoard the old formula, paying inflated, Prohibition-era prices for cases of original Coke. At the Houston Astrodome, a new Coke commercial gets booed live on the Jumbotron. This isn't a complaint about marketing, it's grief, expressed as rage, aimed straight at the executives who assumed a taste test could measure loyalty 79 days after the announcement. Coca-Cola stops defending the decision and reverses it. On July 11, 1985, Coca-Cola calls another press conference, but this time the news runs the other direction. The original formula is coming back, rebranded as Coca-Cola Classic. It's one of the fastest, most public reversals in American corporate history. A company that spent $4 million and 200,000 taste tests defending a decision, undoing it in under 3 months. Network news interrupts regular programming to cover it. For a company built on the idea of never changing the formula, admitting the mistake publicly is almost as risky as the original decision, but by now, there's no other option left. What happens next is the part nobody in Atlanta saw coming. Coca-Cola Classic doesn't just survive the return. Within months, it reclaims the #1 spot in American colas. Ahead of Pepsi, ahead of New Coke, the crisis that should have wrecked the brand instead reminds an entire country how much it loved the original. New Coke, meanwhile, quietly fades. Renamed Coke 2 in 1992, it lingers on shelves with shrinking distribution for another decade before being discontinued for good in July 2002. The product built to save the company from Pepsi, dying without anyone really noticing. Some historians and marketers now call the whole saga an accidental masterstroke, not because Coca-Cola planned the outrage, but because it proved, at massive cost, exactly how deep the loyalty to the original brand ran. Others simply call it what it looked like in real time, a costly, avoidable mistake. Either way, the vault in Atlanta never got touched again. The real lesson of New Coke isn't don't trust data. It's that data only measures what you ask it to measure. Coca-Cola asked 200,000 people which liquid tasted better in a blind cup, and got a clear answer. It never asked what that formula meant to the people drinking it. Nostalgia, identity, 99 years of memory, none of that shows up in a taste test. And all of it showed up the moment the original disappeared from shelves. The mistake wasn't the recipe. It was mistaking a lab result for the whole truth. If you want more stories of good data leading straight to bad decisions, Business Failures has one every week. Subscribe to catch the next one.